And let's get into Baltimore's one of their biggest rivals. I mean, this is definitely one of the more contentious divisions in the NFL, in my opinion. But let's get into probably their biggest rival over the last couple of years, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Mm-hmm.
Big move for the Pittsburgh Steelers this summer. Aaron Rodgers taking him on June 6th. That was after it was well known that Rodgers would be leaving the Jets. They made the announcement in mid-February, the Jets, that they'd be parting ways with Rodgers after 2 seasons. As soon as the 2025 NFL calendar started, they let Rodgers go on March 12th, and then it was about 3 months before he joined the Steelers. Obviously, he's been in this league for a long time. Already got a Super Bowl with the Packers. The tenure with the Jets did not go the way that anyone wanted it to go. And it kind of feels like he still wants to prove something in the NFL with the Steelers. So team number 3 for Rodgers, it kind of feels like maybe it's the last ride, but we don't know. For you, what do you feel like Aaron Rodgers might still have left to prove in this league?
I don't think he really does. He's won 4 MVPs. He's got a Super Bowl win under his belt. He's one of the winningest quarterbacks of all time, one of the most efficient of all time. I think he just wants to prove that 2010, 2011 wasn't a fluke and that he is still, like, we all know he's a great quarterback. We all know that he's got, like, not that he has it anymore, but his ability to manipulate defenses with his eyes, make sound decision-making, and just be a good quarterback and do it at a highly efficient level. Like, that's who Aaron Rodgers is and was until a couple of years ago whenever he signed with the Jets, right? Like, we haven't seen the same Aaron Rodgers, and I don't think we're going to at this point. It's his last season. He's still kind of – he looks like he's hobbling around, which I know he's not injured, but, like, he's 41, right? He's much on the older side, and – he just doesn't have juice in his arm anymore. Like, he's a fine quarterback to be a bridge quarterback for next year. Maybe the Steelers' long-term plan is to develop Will Howard, who's just a massive human for a quarterback. And kind of like, not that he reminds me of Ben Roethlisberger in his play, but it's just the size of the other quarterbacks in the league. He's in the upper echelon of that. I think he's there to kind of help him develop and take a back seat, because there were some Steelers players who were very vocal, like, look, if he's going to come here, he needs to put his bullshit aside and he needs to go to work and just come here and be a veteran and not make it about him. And Cam Hayward specifically called him out. And since he's joined the Steelers, I've not heard a peep about Aaron Rodgers, like, doing anything outlandish. And not that anything he did with the Jets was outlandish, but it definitely seemed like it was about him and his arrival and how he was going to restore and revive the Jets when he got there, rather than making it about the team and how he's going to guide these young players and push them forward. That kind of seems that's what's happening in Pittsburgh, is that he's pushing this team forward with the young guys, with the young group, and he's staying out of the limelight. Obviously he's going to go on the Pat McAfee show as he always does, but like, halfway through last year when Devontae Adams is like creeping in the background of his webcam, and this is like their big announcement, like we know what's happening, but they're still playing it like, oh, will they, won't they? Like, we haven't seen any of that or anything close to that since he's been in Pittsburgh. But in terms of playing ability, I think he's dropped off a cliff in terms of where he was even 2 or 3 years ago. From at the end of last season, from week 11 to week 17, he was a bottom 10 quarterback, out of the 29 quarterbacks that had 150 dropbacks, like from every statistical category you can look at. And even on tape, he didn't look like Aaron Rodgers anymore. Beginning of the season, middle of the season looked pretty good, but that last third to, quarter just did not look anything like we've seen Aaron Rodgers before. So I think if the Steelers don't put the ball in his hands more than 60% of the time, and they lean on a running back committee and just run a true West Coast style offense, I think they'll be good. And I think Aaron Rodgers will have a good finish to his career. I don't know if a Super Bowl is going to happen for them this year, just with how loaded the AFC is, but I think he just wants to go out on a better note than his tenure with the Jets. Because I think what happened with the Jets has left a bad taste in everyone's mouth around the NFL, not just Jets fans.
Yeah, and if I could speak as a Jets fan for a second, I mean,
Yeah.
to give Rodgers some credit, last year the Jets looked rough, but you look at his individual statistics. I mean, the big thing that stand out for me in terms of regression are his yards per attempt. This was his lowest. 2024 was his lowest yards per attempt in 10 years, obviously not counting 2023, at 6.7. But he was just 103 yards shy of 4,000. He moved okay. Obviously, not the way he did 10 years ago, but that's not, you don't really expect a guy like that to move the way he did, anyone to move the way they did 10 years ago. For me, the real test is while Aaron Rodgers was playing in 2024 with the Jets, obviously, there was, like you said, the appearances on the Pat McAfee show, all the, conspiracy theory stuff, like all that kind of stuff that, some people were hot on it, some people were cold on it. For me, it was really hard to figure out where the problems with this team started with Aaron Rodgers and where they started with the Jets, right? Because, I mean, talking on Aaron Rodgers' side, obviously, like you said, kind of making it about him a little bit. A lot of the media attention that he got, being in the New York market, it's pretty natural, but he obviously reveled in it a little bit, all the Pat McAfee show appearances. And then on the field, obviously, bringing in Nathaniel Hackett, that was obviously a big push from Aaron Rodgers, and that obviously that did not really work out the way it was intended to at all. But like we've said in the AFC East podcast, like he also had to contend with just the general Jets disorganization that went along with it. So I feel like for this year in the Steelers, obviously they're not a program that has excelled in recent years, but they're a program that has always kind of stayed just above the waterline. Obviously, you've got that streak of Mike Tomlin's, winning seasons. He's gone so long without, losing season. But I think this is the real test to figure out like how much, what the ratio was between the Jets and Aaron Rodgers in terms of just overall disorganization and, kind of laughably bad football.
Yeah.
But I want to move away from Aaron Rodgers and the offense and get into the defense. You've talked about how deep this defense could be. So for you, what are the big things on this defensive unit that you feel like could give Aaron Rodgers and company the most cushion when they've got the ball?
I think it's just controlling possessions and controlling the clock and letting Aaron be on the field, for 35 minutes plus a game, which is a very lofty number. You don't see that a lot. But if they can allow this offense to be on the field often and just churn drives out and let this defense stay fresh, so this way they can get after the opposing offense and get the ball back in his hands, I think that's best case scenario. I mean, you obviously have the big names like TJ Watt. They traded for Jalen Ramsey, which I think was a fantastic trade for the Steelers. I think he's going to, in their base defense, he's going to play strong safety and come down in the box. And then in nickel, he'll be the nickel. Like he's a perfect fit in this defense. Because he might not be as athletic as he used to be, but he's still one of the best run defending corners in the league. He's one of the best man corners in the league. He's got that veteran savviness now that he didn't really have early on in his career, where he would just kind of take shots and would risk losing leverage to make a big play. Like he doesn't do that anymore. Like Jalen Ramsey is a very, very sound corner, even in his old age. He's probably got another 5 years in the league, if not more. Then they bring in Darius Slay. They have Joey Porter Jr. On the defensive front, they have Keanu Benton, who's really solid in developing. Cam Hayward is a savvy veteran. They drafted Derek Harmon, who's just a fucking freak from Oregon. Like a man his size should not move the way he does. And I need to show you some film on him because he is just disgusting. He was a top 15 player for me in this past class, almost top 10, just nuts. And then you look at the linebackers. They have Peyton Wilson, who's pretty solid. They lost Landon Roberts, but they bring in Cole Holcomb. There's good guys on this defense all around, and those are just I can't forget to mention Alex Highsmith, who's a really good edge too, opposite TJ Watt, and that's not even getting into their depth. They have Nick Herbig, who's one of the best designated pass rushers in the league. Jack Sawyer, who they just drafted in the 4th round, gonna be their edge 4 and like spell run defender. If like TJ Highsmith need a breather, he's going out there, Yaya Black, DT out of Iowa, gonna fill in really nicely as a depth piece on the D line. As we move further back, Malik Harrison and Cole Holcomb they bring in for free agency. Malik Harrison's probably going to be more of that, zone cover guy. Holcomb's going to be that run defending guy. Corey Trice, Beanie Bishop, Brendan Eccles, all at the corner position, all have good playing experience and are solid. Chuck Clark, before I believe it was Achilles tear, it might have been ACL, was a pretty solid safety for Baltimore. And then Sebastian Castro, safety/nickel. If Jalen Ramsey goes down and they don't trust Corey Trice or Beanie Bishop to go in the slot, you could put this guy in because he was a really good slot corner at Iowa. Like he was one of the better ones that I scouted at least, but like not starter NFL material. But if you need him to fill in for a few games and you want to put Jalen Ramsey at the outside because let's say Darius Slay takes a step back or Joey Porter is being too aggressive and you don't want to draw a stupid PI penalty like he usually does, like once a couple of games, you can do that. You can shift guys around. This defense is multiple. It's deep. It's got veterans. It's got young guys, and it's got role players in the right spot. Like this is, I can't remember the last time I was this excited for a defense, and the Steelers have been like this for years. Now they're loaded at every spot, at least 3 or 4 guys deep on the depth chart. Like, I've never seen a defense this complete, at least going into a season. We'll see how it goes throughout the year. But I love what they've done in that room over the past 3 years, especially.
Absolutely. And taking a look at the Steelers' schedule, maybe just looking in within like the first 4 games, because they have a bye week 5. They start the season off in New York at the Jets. They host the Seahawks. They head to New England to play the Patriots. And then they actually head to Dublin to take on the Minnesota Vikings. So for you, anything in these first 4 matchups from the defensive side of the ball that you feel like could be a good signifier for how this team will do on the defensively? Maybe specifically how they handle a guy like Justin Jefferson or Stephon Diggs, like any matchups that you feel like could be key in getting an idea of what their identity is defensively.
I think the biggest thing week 1 is going to be feeling out and seeing how the Jets do with their run game, because they have Justin Fields, who's a dynamic runner. They have Breece Hall, who's also dynamic. Braylon Allen's their bruiser, and Isaiah Davis is their spellback. Like, that's a 4-headed rushing attack, and they're going to use all 4 guys. I wouldn't be shocked if, all 4 of them had 7+ carries that first game, right? Like, is really their only passing threat is Garrett Wilson. Josh Reynolds is a solid option. We talked about this in the AFC East episode, but they're going to have to defend the run and defend it at a high level, and that's going to set them up against the Seahawks, who are going to lean much more run-heavy with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet and more of an outside zone style scheme. And so you're going to play 2 heavy run teams, but 2 different running styles where the Jets are going to want to stay in between the tackles, except for when Breece Hall breaks one to the outside, which he inevitably always does and gets a big gain. And then you're going to go against the Seahawks, who are going to want to stretch you laterally and find spaces in between, right? So you're going against 2 run-heavy offenses. Then you're going to play New England, who's going to want to use Drake May, leverage a relatively deep receiving room, has still a good rushing attack, and see what happens there. And then that's going to ramp up into the Vikings, where they're going to be pass-heavy. They want to unleash J.J. McCarthy, and I'm telling you right now, if you still have fantasy drafts going on, take J.J. McCarthy with your last pick or one of your last picks, because it's going to be damn well worth it for you in the long term, especially if you're in Dynasty. Like, just go get him. If he's available somewhere in Dynasty. He's probably not, but go make a trade for the kid. And then, so just how the schedule evolves and how different each defense is going to be. I think it's not the matchups, it's how differently they're going to have to prepare for each team. And if they end up 4-0 and they allow, let's say, less than 18 points per game in this stretch, like, that's going to put them in a really good window, because then you go play the Browns, who had a really bad offense last year. Then you play the Bengals, who are obviously really good. But then you play the Packers, who do well in the short game but don't really have a deep threat. The Colts and Daniel Jones, which we'll talk about how pissed I am at the Colts. And then you have a really good run at the end of the year against some really high-powered offenses, right? So if you can go 3-1 and maybe even 4-0 this stretch, and the defense's main reason for that, I think that's going to open up the world of possibilities for this offense to kind of say, hey, the defense has stepped up while we figure our shit out, and after the bye week, we're hitting the ground running. But if they drop, like, let's say I think they're going to lose to the Vikings because the Vikings are just ridiculous this year coming into this year. But I think they could also drop one to the Pats or the Seahawks. If they don't win one of those two games, that's when I'm going to kind of be skeptical, because it's all these offenses are different and you have answers for all of them. What are you doing to help prepare and keep this defense steady so this way the offense can let themselves work and get recuperated? Because like you said earlier, Aaron Rodgers arrived in May. And yes, he's a veteran, but losing February, March, April, and a good chunk of May to be in the facility, meet the guys, get some throws in with your new pass catchers, like, that's kind of tough.
Absolutely. And going back onto the offensive side, I want to talk your dark horse, Jaylen Warren. Kind of like Keaton Mitchell, a running back who had a solid 2023, got hurt. Obviously did not meet the same statistical margins that he did in 2024 that he did in 2023. But for you, where could he come back and make a huge splash in this offense?
I think just doing what he did as a receiving back in 2023 is going to be important while keeping that efficient rushing up to par, right? So in 2023, there were 41 running backs with 125 carries. These are his ranks in multiple key categories for rushing. He was 7th in rush grade and 11th in offensive grade. So it's top quarter in both, and top 20% for rush grade. He was 2nd in yards per attempt and 2nd in yards per attempt after contact. Really solid. 7th in missed tackles forced per carry. He was tied 10th in carries of 10 plus yards. So we're looking at a top 10 running back from 2023, and he had a good volume of carries. Then we go to the receiving side. He was 5th in receiving grade, 5th in yards per route run, 13th in total yards. And here's the kicker. He was tied for the 5th lowest average depth of target at negative 0.18 yards. He was getting targeted almost 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage on average, and he was still top 15 in receiving yards. Like, that just shows his yak ability. He was tied 20th in yak per reception, but I think that kind of is – that doesn't really make sense with the ADOT and how many yards he was getting after that. Like, if he's targeted a little further downfield, he's probably pushing top 8 for yards, right? Like, he does a really good job of making guys miss in a phone booth, like I said earlier, and he's got more oomph in him than Keaton Mitchell has, right? And this may be a committee backfield. They drafted Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, who, if he has an open crease, he's better at exploiting it than anyone else in this class, and really not anyone else in the league, but I would put him up there with some pretty significant running backs in terms of, if the window's there, he's breaking away and getting 20 yards on almost every time that's open. But the thing is, with this offensive line, I don't know if that's going to be there nearly as often as it was at Iowa. And I think for that reason, Jaylen Warren is better at making spaces happen when they aren't there, versus Caleb Johnson needs the space there to make something happen. So I think, Jaylen Warren, at least this year, will get the bulk of the carries. It may not be like 200 to 100. I think it'll be like 150 to like 130, but those 20 carries are going to make all the difference for this offense. And I think I love Jaylen Warren. Like, he's the type of football player I would want in my locker room. Like, kind of like Austin Eckler when he was coming back on the scene, in like 2017, 2018, that time frame. Like, Jaylen Warren is of that archetype for a running back.
Yeah, and like you said, for a running back who is specifically a receiving back who is really good at getting the ball behind the line of scrimmage and then taking it further, right? I mean, that's almost like a perfect pairing for a guy like Aaron Rodgers, right? Who, like we said, is his yards per attempt is one of the lowest it's been in his whole career. So that's kind of almost exactly the kind of guy you want in the backfield with an aging quarterback like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And like, the problem is that like, there's not a whole lot of other receiving threats on this team. Like, DK Metcalf is not what he was in 2020. He is not developed into the route runner that it looked like he was going to become early in his career. And then you got Calvin Austin, Robert Woods, Roman Wilson, like all like kind of teetering wide receiver threes who are going to get thrown in a wide receiver 2 role. And then Pat Freiermuth, possession guy, Jonnu Smith, who was great in Miami last year, is like Arthur Smith likes him, but he doesn't like using him often. Like he'll use him, but he's not going to get as many targets as he did with Miami. And you have Darnell Washington, who's just a big freak who could probably play offensive tackle for this team, but unfortunately they want to play him at tight end for whatever reason, even though they need a tackle, right? Like there's a reality Jaylen Warren is second in targets on this team. Like I'm just putting it flat out there, like with what you said, with the low yards per attempt, the low ADOT, guys not being able to get open, like Aaron Rodgers might be checking it down a lot, and they might be splitting Jaylen Warren out wider in the slot and saying, hey, just get open on a linebacker or a safety, and we'll just put it on your chest and let you work, right? Like, it's a reality, like it's a small reality that happens, but if he did finish second in targets, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we've said, it's been a long time since the Steelers have had a losing season. But also, if you look at the last 25 years of Steelers drafting, it's also not very often that they have a top 10 draft pick. Their last pick in the top 10 was in 2019 with Devin Bush. He was picked 10th. But since then, you got to go all the way back to the year 2000 when they drafted Plaxico Burress at 8th overall. People talk about Mike Tomlin and his coaching record and how, it's been a very long time before the Steelers have had a losing season. At a certain point, though, you kind of hit this really hard plateau, right?
Yeah.
So obviously no one wants to have a losing season. No one wants to be in tank mode. But for you, if the Steelers, they go 10-7 again, and then they pop out in the division round again, like for you, what is the mindset for the Steelers front offense?
You got to blow it all up. Like Mike Tomlin is Mike Tomlin. I would say after this year, like Aaron Rodgers is going to be on his way out. Like he said, this is most likely his last season. Cam Hayward's going to be on his way out. TJ Watt just got a ridiculous contract coming off the worst season of his career. Like he's still a good defender, but he's not what he was even last year or 2 years ago. Excuse me. You just brought in all this talent to try to make one last push. If it doesn't work out, like don't try to save yourself like the Saints have been doing for the past 6-7 years, right? Like you got to blow it all up, I think. And I think that starts with restructuring contracts, trading away key pieces that aren't on super lucrative deals. And you just bite the bullet. You eat contracts like TJ Watts, Alex Highsmith, who I love Highsmith, but if they're blowing it all up, there's really no reason for him to stay in Pittsburgh other than the bag, right? Like you just got to completely rebuild and just say, hey, like, let's try Will Howard out. Like, this is a national championship winning quarterback. Let's just see what happens. Like, he's going to learn under Aaron for a year, see what he has for a year or two. And if it doesn't work out, then we'll get a quarterback in 2027 or 2028. Like, we'll figure it out. But, like, if you don't make playoffs and you've gone year over year bringing in savvy veterans and overpaying players and blowing up roster spots that don't need to be blown up. Like they had Deontay Johnson and George Pickens 2 years ago. And I know Deontay is who Deontay is now, but like you could have made that work. They were two perfectly differing skill sets. And I know Deontay had the drops issues. He's had some behavioral stuff, but if Mike Tomlin's good at anything, it's reeling in receivers and turning them into really good players. Like they could have made something work without trying to make all these elaborate moves and try to make, hey, our Super Bowl window's this tight, we have to push for it. Like, you could have expanded it. And I would feel a lot better where the Steelers are right now if they tried that. And they really didn't. Like, they just kind of said, oh, we'll just change this and then we're right back. Like, yeah, but the AFC is so friggin' deep. You can't just put a Band-Aid on things and expect them to work out. Like, NFC, you might get away with it because the talent is not nearly the same as it is in the AFC right now. But that's just how it is. I think you got to fire Tomlin and just start from scratch if you don't make the playoffs this year. And even if you do make the playoffs, if you don't get past the wild card round, I think you still consider that.
Yeah, absolutely. So potentially some very tough questions for Steelers fans and the front office come February.